Thanks so much for joining, everyone. We'll just make 30 more seconds for anyone else to join. But while we're waiting, please do introduce yourself in the chat and how you first became involved with Restless. Take part in the poll as well. We're finding out how long you've all been with us for. And if you are putting a message in the chat, make sure it's all panelists and attendees. Okay, I think we'll get going. I can see from the polling that we've got a real mix. Most of you have been with us for quite some time, but we've also got some newer people as well, which is lovely. Hopefully you can see the results now if you couldn't before. Yeah, so I think 3/4 of the group have actually been with us for more than a year, which is fantastic, and quite a few even more than 10 years, which is brilliant. You're all very welcome. So thanks so much for joining the first of our 3 lunchtime webinars in our Becoming Restless Changing Development series. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so that you can see the speakers. So it's great to see some names I recognise joining today, but for those that don't know me, welcome. I'm Megan. I've been working at Restless Development for just over a year now, and I'm the philanthropy coordinator in our partnerships and events team. So this year marks 10 years since we became Restless Development, having been SPW since 1985 before that. So in celebration, our leaders and supporters will be sharing the journey we've been on to do development differently, with insights into our work and the future of Restless, all in the hopes of inspiring you all to be part of our journey going forward as supporters if you'd like to. Please do write any questions you have for our fantastic speakers in the Q&A function throughout the webinar. We'll answer as many of them as possible during our optional Q&A session for those that are able to stay after 1:30. So I'm really excited to introduce our fantastic speakers today. We've got supporter Jim Sewell and Uganda Hub's Head of Programmes and Partnerships, Juliet Nakazibwe. They'll both be sharing their experience with Restless Development. Both of them joined us back when we were known as Student Partnerships Worldwide, or SPW, and both of them have helped the organisation and young leaders grow in a very different but profoundly impactful way. So our first speaker is Jim Sewell, who is who has been at the helm of countless opportunities for the fundraising team. Jim's been involved for 30 years and has been a volunteer, trustee, supporter, networker, and co-founder of the school's triathlon series. So it's my pleasure to introduce him as he shares his journey and why he believes in Restless Development's work.
Brilliant, thanks Megan. So good afternoon everyone. So yeah, as Megan said quite scarily, I first got involved with Restless Development, or Student Partnership Worldwide as it was then, in 1990. So 30 years ago. I was just finishing school and volunteered to teach in Zimbabwe for a year. So at the time, SPW was very much an organisation that sent young school leavers from the UK just to Zimbabwe and Nepal. We didn't get any training, and it was very, very much sink or swim, but it was an incredibly rewarding year. So many of the volunteers made a really big difference to the kids we taught. Importantly for me, it gave me a real love of Africa and an appreciation of the benefits of volunteering, both personally and to the communities we worked in. I got back involved in 2006, so quite a big gap, when I was asked to be a trustee, and I joined an organisation that was very, very different. So it was focused on delivering through in-country volunteers, with young people at the heart of development in their own communities, so a real flip to how it had been set up. I actually remember really clearly when the new branding was first presented to the board, the CEO, Eric Levine, explained that young people are restless, they've got all this energy and enthusiasm, and with the right training and support are vital to leading development. So it just made complete sense to me as a branding, and perfectly encapsulated the sort of organisational transformation that had happened within Restless. So in 2015, so 9 years later, I loved doing the trustee work, and I actually gave up my real job running an IT company that I'd helped found in 1994. So I've been running it for 24 years, and I actually gave up the paid job to become a full-time volunteer again. And there were 3 areas I really wanted to help support on the fundraising side. So the first side was I set up the school's triathlon series. So I wanted to create a sporting event that was for young people in the UK to take part in with their friends and raise money to support other young people around the world. It's gone a bit bigger than I ever thought it would. We've raised about £1.2 million so far, and last year we raised £500,000 just in 1 year, with 4,000 7 to 13-year-olds taking part. And once the current challenges of running events are over, we can carry on growing the series, and the goal is to raise over £1 million a year in a couple of years' time, which is very achievable. The second area I wanted to help Restless grow was the major donor side. So we set up the Entrepreneur Panel, which is basically a group of inspiring, like-minded people who actually want to get more involved with the charity they donate to, so get under the skin of it, and we really help Restless grow their livelihood programs around the world. So that's raised, I think we've raised over £600,000 since 2015, which is incredible. And then the third area I really wanted to work on was helping businesses and charities understand each other better and sort of create longer term and more lasting relationships and more beneficial. It used to really frustrate me when I ran my own business that we used to vote for a charity every year, we used to do a donation, but there wasn't a lot of engagement from the charity, the staff weren't really involved, we didn't really know what was happening with the money, and it was a new charity every year, so there was no relationship. So at Restless, they've set up a proper managed corporate social responsibility program, where Restless basically help their corporate partners run the CSR program. So whether it's presenting in company meetings on the work that's being done, or helping run pub quizzes, and let's hope we can get back in the pub soon. You know, sporting events, getting staff involved, doing fundraising, social events, and a really critical side is helping companies bring their own values to life, which is one of Restless's really strong areas. So we run a Values Champions program and 2 staff from each corporate partner come and visit our programs each year, have a really inspiring, life-changing trip, and then come back into their business telling everyone they need to be the Values Champions next year. So it's a really great partnership, helping engage staff, bringing their own values to life, helping recruit young people. It's one of the key reasons someone joins a business, is what a company gives back now. And helping reduce staff churn. So all the things you sit in a boardroom and worry about, this program helps. And this has raised about £450,000 of unrestricted funding since 2015. So all 3 areas going really well. I mean, most of the work is done by people in Restless, and I just help sort of keep it going in the right direction. One of the other things I often get asked is why Restless? So, you know, you could support any charity, but to me, Restless really is a very different organisation. I was a trustee for 9 years, and I chaired the people committee, and I sat on the fundraising committee. And you see in that time just how professionally run it is as an organisation, an incredibly talented, driven, dedicated team, but with excellent governance supporting it all. I also loved as a donor seeing that every penny is very wisely spent. So one of the Entrepreneur Panel members visited the Karamoja region of Uganda a few years ago to see some of the livelihood programs that Restless were running. And when he came back, he said he was on this plane going up to the region, and there's a line of 4x4 rather smart white air-conditioned cars waiting, and he was already crossed that that's where the money was going. And then right at the back was this battered old car that was the Restless car, perfectly fine, but just all that was needed. And I think the other thing I love is that I get my family quite involved. So I went to Tanzania with my daughter Sky, who was 14 at the time, and we visited 7 different programs, livelihood programs. And what stood out for me was just how well run the businesses were, you know, clear product ideas, good financial management. And what amazed me was Restless hadn't provided any money to any of these businesses. They just provided training, how to save, how to self-fund their own businesses, what products were working elsewhere, how to sell them and what for. And the fact that each business also had a social benefit. So the group who ran the business also worked in the community, whether it was on sexual health or girls' rights, or dealing with, one of them dealt with a lot of drug issues in an area of Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam. So they were a very close-knit team, both socially and in their business. And one of them we met had been going over 10 years, and Restless were no longer involved. We'd sort of set it up and they were very independent. And two of their members had stood for council. They were sitting on the local council. One of them was going for higher office. And when I asked what the goal was, he said to take the learnings from Restless and expand those learnings. And to me, as a small charity, if you can prove the model and then get people in their own countries actually taking that model and expanding it, that is amazing development, and that's what we should be doing. And I think at a personal level, one of the girls' groups we visited, and Restless had helped them set up a soap making business that was doing really well, and it really inspired my daughter. So most of these girls had faced abuse in the home, had to leave home. A lot of them had very young babies, and they were very young as well. And but they'd set up a really successful business, and they were so positive about the future and about how Restless had supported them. And as we were leaving, my daughter just looked at me very quietly and said, I finally get how lucky I am. And I thought, if that's the only thing I get out of this trip, then that is amazing, because, you know, we create these bubbles for our children, and sometimes they need to get out of that bubble. I think the other thing I'd say is, a lot of people who I've met have sort of said they don't know how to help when it comes to charitable side. And to me, it's just start somewhere. It's whether it's regular giving, or getting your business involved, or becoming a major donor and getting more involved, or getting your kids to do a triathlon, doing things as a family. It's just start somewhere and you'll just see the benefit very quickly. So just in conclusion, for me, being part of a really truly values-driven organisation that year after year listens to young people, puts them at the heart of development in their own communities, is really, really inspiring. And it's delivering true development, not aid, with programmes that create lasting change. And that continues to inspire me to keep giving to Restless, both in my time and my donations. And importantly for me, 30 years on, it helps keep me young, and it helps keep me restless, and long may that continue. So that's it from me. Thanks, Megan.
Thanks so much, Jim. It's really inspirational to hear just how many opportunities you've driven for Restless Development to support more young leaders. If anyone has any questions for Jim, please do keep them going in the Q&A box. And likewise for Juliet, who I'm delighted to introduce next. So Juliet Nakazibwe is Restless Development's Head of Programmes and Partnerships in Uganda. Juliet's been involved with Restless Development since volunteering with us 15 years ago, and is now at the helm of Uganda Hub in their leadership team. She's worked in teams across the hub, from finance and programmes, and on projects ranging from sexual health to livelihoods and leadership. She embodies Restless's values-driven approach and passion for youth power. So I'm really delighted to introduce her as our next speaker.
Joining us today, in my presentation, I'm going to talk about two core things. One is my journey at Restless Development, and secondly, what makes Restless Development different. I began my journey with Restless Development Uganda in 2005 as a volunteer peer educator. And this was the very first and rewarding experience with a development agency. I rejoined later in 2008 as a staff member on various projects. And 13 years later now, I'm the member of Uganda Hub's leadership team as a head of programs and partnership portfolio, really championing youth leadership and result-based programming across our hub. I served this agency when it was SPW for 5 years, and after rebrand to date. A result of the organization's effort to generate young leaders across the world. My time as a volunteer and staff member on various projects really helped to turn my potential into competencies fit to lead development processes. My life completely changed for the better after this experience, from a timid graduate to a confident young leader that I am today. Just a few insights or light moments I remember from my volunteer experience was the passion and the zeal to serve with a smile amidst the constraints the organization had at that time. We mobilized and worked with hard-to-reach young people, women and men, in the most rural communities of Uganda. And we were really inspired by the desire to make a difference and the warm reception from the groups we worked with. They respected us as facilitators. We worked with school administrators who addressed us as equals. And this experience really helped me discover my potential as a young leader. And our values and accountability principles were at the center of everything that we did. I do remember one resounding message that was strongly echoed all throughout my volunteer period and experience that has really shaped the way I make decisions as a staff member of Restless Development. I quote this resounding message as, the money we get in SPW is for young people, and hence must be spent with the purpose of making a positive contribution to their lives. This was a message right from the training when I was a volunteer peer educator, and have witnessed us upholding this value to date. And really through these different roles, I have experienced vertical and horizontal growth from within. I have been trusted to deliver and lead on a lot of processes that I hadn't led on before. I didn't even have a lot of experience to lead them, and possibly other organizations wouldn't have trusted a young person to lead. And this gave me an opportunity to grow as a leader, to understand our vision, our values, to be in position to inspire other team members towards the same. Hence, this entire experience really set a very firm, great foundation for my current role, but most importantly for me as a young woman, as a leader in the development sector. And that is a brief really on my 13-year journey so far. And I'm even more excited to talk about what makes Restless Development different. Under this particular section of our discussion, I'd like to talk about majorly two things. And this is our values and our work, because that's what makes us different and unique. Starting with our values, we are who we serve. Though right now I'm no longer a young person, I am a young profession accountable to young people. I make sure that all the programs we design are representative of young people's priorities, and we invest our resources to address those priorities. We work in the context of poverty. That is good because all development workers and government are working towards addressing that. What is important is that we prove that young people can lead the change in the context of poverty. We measure our results and use our resources wisely and efficiently. We care about getting the right results, and we always seek to improve our work. We generate leaders, and we are proud to carry the banner of youth-led development. We give people the opportunity to succeed and fail, generating leaders through this experience. And it's because of this value that I'm here today as a young leader. We listen and learn. Through dynamic accountability, we are transparent to our donors and young people with our results. We are transparent about what works and what doesn't work. And we use the learnings to adapt our interventions to address the real needs of young people. I would like to conclude my reflection on our values with emphasis that at Restless Development, we don't just talk about values. They are not just on the paper pinned on the wall. They are part and parcel of everything we do. They are integrated in our systems. We celebrate people who exemplify our values. I've been a values champion before on several occasions. They are really part and parcel of everything that we do, because our values shape who we are, and they make us different from others in the field. Moving on, I would like to talk about our work as an agency. We work in the context of poverty, and specifically my experience on our work is going to be limited to Uganda, our hub. For example, we've been working in Uganda since 1997. Our priorities are young people's sexual rights, livelihood, active participation in planning and decision-making process, and we want to see them as leaders. But all these ambitions overlap because that's how we fix the whole problem, not just part of it. We believe that transformative change happens when young people deliver, inform, and influence. What I mean here is that when young people directly improve lives through working in and with communities, when they gather evidence on the lived realities to inform the world about their true needs and challenges, and when they influence the cultural norms, policies, and systems that affect young people's lives, and hold decision makers accountable for the promises that they make. That is who we are, and that's what we do as an agency, to shape and improve the lives of young people. I want to conclude my discussion by talking about our impact, and I'd like to share at least one highlight from one of the impact from one of the dynamic programs that we implement in Uganda, using a significant case story from a young woman by the names of Daphne. Daphne is a 23-year-old young mother who worked as a peer educator on the dynamic program. Having dropped out of school, I should say high school, she got married at the age of 17, and even her husband was a young boy. As a young couple, they really faced a lot of challenges because they didn't have any source of income. Daphne joined the dynamic program as a peer educator. She received training on financial literacy, on life skills, on business skills, on commercial agriculture, and really her roles involved forming, training, and mentoring community youth groups in her rural community. Daphne's success with her youth groups was remarkable. Still, we see the power of youth leadership here at play. Because of the support and the skills she was given, she was able to translate that to other community youth within her villages or within her community. And the impact that she did was remarkable. But most important also, her ambition thereafter gives a very good impression. After the training, she realized how naive she was in beekeeping and poultry management and a lot of other livelihood enterprises, and a huge potential that she was really missing. So she decided to start up her own poultry business and commercial farming using the stipend that she received as a peer educator. So as part of our youth leadership model, peer educators lead the delivery of our work, and we really give them a small subsistence stipend to keep them going as young people for their subsistence needs. And here we hear that Daphne translated that into a success story. She used that stipend to start up something for herself. And through the linkages with private sector actors, she started commercial farming on a large scale, which she would sell to Mukwano group of companies, a private sector, one of the key core private sectors in Uganda. And even with the outbreak of the COVID-19, during the lockdown, Daphne worked with her colleague to grow their commercial agriculture, planting soya beans and sunflowers. And because she was very confident and sure that there is ready market from the private sectors whom they were linked to through the program. Daphne's story and experience is not different from the 100,000 young peer educators whom we have worked with across the 5 years, and more deeper life-changing stories from the 110,000 out-of-school young people that we reached through the program. Really amazing stories that really came out of this program. Young people's lives changed. They started enterprises. They were linked to the private sector. They were linked to government opportunities. We saw really real lives changing and young people embracing different enterprises and appreciating the value of being part and parcel of the agricultural value chain within their communities. Funded by the MasterCard Foundation, the dynamic program worked to ensure that out-of-school and economically disadvantaged young people have the skills and access to support systems to ensure entry-level jobs, or at least start their own businesses in agriculture and along the entire value chain. And one of the key case studies I've just shared is just an example, one of the examples in the thousands of the peer educators and 110,000 of the out-of-school young people that we reached. Thank you.
So we'll shortly move on to our Q&A for those of us that are able to stay. So please do keep putting your questions for our brilliant speakers in the Q&A box. We'll get to as many as possible. But first, I want to share why we're sharing these stories with you. So as you've heard, Jim and Juliet have first-hand knowledge that Restless Development's work supporting young people to lead change in their communities is an incredibly effective, sustainable and impactful way to do development. But we can't do this on our own. And now more than ever, we really need the support of all of our friends and networks. So if you've been inspired by today's discussion, we'd like to ask you to be part of the next chapter of our journey. There are lots of ways to support our work, and today we'd love for you to consider doing just one by supporting us personally with a monthly donation at restlessdevelopment.org/donate. You can also get in touch with me at megan@restlessdevelopment.org if you're interested in partnering with us. We can help the biggest youth generation of our time to tackle the greatest challenges our world faces together with your support. And thank you so much to our existing partners for being part of this journey already. We really do appreciate it. So now let's move on to the Q&A section of the webinar for those that are able to stay on for 15 more minutes. We do know this is a work day for many of us, so thank you to anyone who needs to dash off for joining us. But we'd love to hear your questions if you are able to stay on. I'll just take a look now and pull out some of your questions. Okay, so the first question we've got is for Jim. So this says, could you share with us your favourite story of a young person you've met or worked with, whether that's on your SPW journey or a young triathlete that you've worked with?
That's a good question. So young triathletes, it's brilliant. Around February time, when I'm getting up at 5:30 in the morning to drive to assemblies 2 hours away, I question my sanity. And then when we run the events, which are in April and May, it just makes you realise why you do it. And the kids are fantastic. And a couple of years ago, I was in the bike pen, which is always complete chaos. And you've got teams of 13-year-olds losing themselves and each other. And there was one team who came up and said, "We're the Hopeless Four," was the team name of their team. And often you have the Fantastic Four. And I said, "Why have you done that?" They said, "Because we're terrible at sport. And this is the one event we love doing every year. And we've raised over £1,000 for charity." And I said, "Well, that's one of the top fundraising teams in the whole country. So you might not be the fastest, but that's who we give the awards to." And I just sort of thought that is what this is all about. It's just when you give young people a chance to fundraise and have some fun and do some sport, they just love it. And it makes me realise each year why I do it. So, you know, from a young triathlete point of view, that would, you know, there's lots of teams like that who just properly inspire you and make you carry on doing it. And on the programs, I actually still wear one of the, I got given this by a chap in Tanzania who was on one of the programs, who was an absolute comic, where we were sitting and he was running a pea business it was a really difficult area, very dry, and he just made me laugh for the entire presentation. And I just thought, you know, if you can be this cheerful and this motivational in very difficult circumstances, then, you know, I'm so happy if I can do anything to help. So, but yeah, lots of things that keep me very inspired.
Lovely, thanks so much, Jim. We've got the next question, I think that you might be able to help with as well, because I believe that you were on the board for the rebrand. So the next question is, I was curious to learn how we came up with the name Restless Development, if there is a story behind it.
So yeah, I mean, I remember Eric giving the background. So there's an amazing marketing agency called Fig Tree, who every year do a pro bono rebrand for a charity, and charities present why it should be them, and Restless won that year. And Fig Tree, I think, thought it would be a quick job, but they interviewed everyone in the organisation, lots of the volunteers, to understand what were the key things that drove sort of the staff and the young people that we served. And, you know, I think, like I said in the speech, that what came back again and again was this restless energy, and the fact you could either look on it in a very negative way, and young people being a bit of a menace and particularly could be difficult. And there were lots of words like patient and impatient with the im crossed off, and possible and impossible. And, you know, so I think, yeah, they went through a really big journey with everyone in Restless to come to this Restless Development brand. And I think Eric thought all the board were a bit staid and would say, "Oh no, that's terribly racy." But actually, to me, it summarised it perfectly, like I said earlier.
Lovely, thanks so much, Jim. I'm going to ask Juliet to unmute and see how we get on with the internet. So the next question is, would love to know how the panelists would explain what Restless Development is to a 5-year-old. Juliet, do you want to give it a go?
Wow, that's a good one. Wow. I mean, to the 5-year-old, I think the most important thing is for that child
Oh no, I'm so sorry. More technical difficulties, but what I'll do is I'll ask Juliet afterwards and see if we can send that round.
For them to understand that Restless Development is about her or him when above. So it's like Restless Development.
There we are. Sorry about that. I think there's a lag, so it takes a while for it to come together. But I'll ask, I'll make a note of that one and ask Juliet and send that around as a follow-up tomorrow.
What we say when we're talking to the kids in assemblies, who some of them are 7 or 8, so it's trying to explain. And to me, it's just the fact that Restless listens to what young people actually need and want, and young people often do know that. And then we help young people be part of that solution. So it's whether it's just like being 7 or 8 in a school, you know, it's you're helped understand how to make the most of what do you need and how do you make the most of it. So, you know, whatever the theme, whether it's livelihoods or sexual health or environment, it could be any theme. But the key thing for Restless is they listen to young people and then help young people be part of that solution. And that's the biggest thing for me.
Lovely, well put. Thanks so much, Jim. Okay, so the next question then is, how do you feel Restless Development currently empowers the community it serves in order to make their work sustainable and avoid issues such as white saviorism or lack of long-term development?
For me,
are you happy to give it a go, Joe? Jim, sorry. Otherwise, we can see if Juliet wants to give it a go, or I can.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much like the same answer, really. It's not telling anyone what we should be doing. It's not turning up in some community and saying, this is what we think you need. It's working year after year in the same communities and understanding what they actually need, and then just helping through training and development them achieve that. So, you know, yeah, I get the whole white saviour issue and everything else, but and the fact that Restless has changed fundamentally from 30 years ago to sending slightly white middle class kids from the UK to, you know, the majority of people are in-country volunteers. You know, I think immediately that's young people training their peers in their own communities. So that solves a lot of the challenges I think a lot of other charities do still face.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, and I would add on to that, you know, it is an ongoing challenge in the development sector, that we need to continually be looking inwards organisationally and thinking about how we address that. I think Restless Development has it better than some, but there's always room for improvement, and we're always continually looking at making sure decisions are made by the people in the communities that live there and work there, because that makes most sense morally and just in terms of what works. So thanks so much for that question. We've got a question now. Oh, Juliet, are you back? Fantastic. I was just going to see if you were, so that you might like to take this next one. Do you think your internet's looking okay, Juliet?
Yeah, I think so. It's okay now.
Lovely, great. So the next question then is, what do you feel the biggest challenges are for the organisation and the sector? What can young people aspiring for a job in development do to help, especially with a social science degree such as economics? So that's the biggest challenges for the organisation and the sector, and what can young people do to help?
Okay, yes, I think 2 big challenges. I think one of the main challenges is around collaboration. So for example, you find that there are quite a lot of actors in like doing development work in the country. So I find that really coordinating that space, ensuring that as key actors, you're not duplicating and you're using the resources efficiently to address the real needs. That has been one of the key critical challenges. And interestingly, is the fact that as Restless Development, we are able to recognize that, and we run different platforms. So we have the National Youth Working Group that brings together over 400 CSOs in Uganda. And the purpose is really to really harmonize interventions to ensure that we avoid duplication, to see that the money that we have as development agencies really meaningfully contribute to young people that we reach out to without duplication. I think the other challenge we really see as an organization is really generating real impact, like designing interventions that genuinely speak to the needs of young people. I should say as Restless Development, we are good in that area, but we're also continuously learning to see how best we can improve in that area. Some of the key things we are currently working on is the key core element of dynamic accountability, really working with the young people and the communities to design our intervention so that what we deliver is really based on the real needs, but also working with the structures in the communities where we work to reinforce sustainability of these interventions. And currently in Uganda, we do implement a program dubbed as the Development Alternative, really challenging development workers and civil society organizations to do development differently. And it involves it's a youth-led program that involves young people interfacing with the different projects that we deliver in the different communities and challenging the different partners responsible for those projects to see that the programs are really responding to the real needs. So they identify these programs and hold meetings with the partners responsible for these programs to discuss and fix some of the key challenges that are with the programs to ensure that as they deliver, they really speak to the needs and respond to the critical challenges in the communities.
Thanks so much, Juliet. That's brilliant. And I wondered if you wanted to add anything now that your internet seems to be back to that question about making our work sustainable, avoiding white saviorism or lack of long-term development.
I beg your pardon?
So the question was, sorry, how do you feel Restless Development currently empowers the community it serves in order to make their work sustainable, avoid white saviorism or lack of long-term development? Is there anything that you'd add?
Yeah, I think most of the key things were really put out. I think more to emphasize is the fact that we take an approach of involving the community in the designing of our interventions. So putting the youth-led approach at the center of everything we do. When we design the interventions, we ensure that these are speaking to the needs of young people. So we discuss with young people, bring them on the table to really discuss what their real needs are and what would be the ideal strategies to address some of those key challenges. And with that approach, then we are able to really deliver a program that speaks to the needs of young people. And then the second area has been strongly around working with the existing community structures from the community to district and national level to ensure that these key issues are institutionalized. For example, if we work with the schools, ensuring that messages around sexual reproductive health and rights are institutionalized within the school programs and calendars, so that even if the program ends, then there is a process within a structured framework that will ensure that such messaging continues. And then I remember I was sharing about a story of Daphne, and then my internet cut off. One of the key sustainability measures for this program was to ensure that the program is led by young people themselves. So Daphne was a community peer educator, and she transformed a lot of lives within that community. But what that means in terms of sustainability, she has the skills. She's socially connected with the different groups that she was working with. But also we linked these young people with the different private sector actors. So all the commercial produce that they grew, they were sure of the ready market. We linked them to the financial institutions like the banks in the communities where they're working. So even when Restless Development is not there, Daphne is able to go to the bank, she's able to access the private sector actor, she's able to access the fellow community members for social support and network, because that's also critical for her businesses. So we really build the system and the network within the communities where we work to ensure that even when we are not there, the system still operates to support the young people.
Thanks so much, Juliet. And as mentioned, we've got that video, so we'll be able to share that Daphine's story afterwards. Lovely. So we've got a question here that says the thoughts on the next 5 years for Restless, which maybe it'd be great to have both your thoughts on impact, sector changes, etc.
I'm not sure now. I'm not a trustee. I'm qualified to comment on the next 5 years, and I know Restless are just looking at the next 5-year strategy. So all I can say is that having been part of 2 5-year strategies, that feedback comes from the communities that we work in and the young people we work with and the organisations. So I know the environment is becoming a more and more central impact on a lot of the areas we work, and therefore it's becoming a more central issue for Restless in our programs. So, but I think outside that, Juliet's probably far more qualified than me if her internet's working, and she's probably part of the next 5-year strategy discussions.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, Juliet, are you happy to take that one then?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think for the next 5 years, really our strategy is going to be centered pretty much about youth leadership. We recognize that we have a lot of young people around the world, even in Uganda, the country where I'm based, 78% of the population are young people. So our next strategy is really looking at youth leadership being at the center of everything that we do, being in position to empower young people, to be in position to influence the private sector, to influence civil society organization, to influence their fellow young people within the communities, to address the key critical challenges that we and young people are battling with in our countries, issues of climate change, issues of sexual reproductive health and rights, issues of economic empowerment. So the issue is around really investing in the power of young people, because we know without involving young people, we'll not be able to solve all these challenges, because they really have the answers to most of the key challenges that they face. So the ambition is really investing in youth leadership for them to be in position to influence their fellow young people in the communities where they work, to influence the private sector, to influence the government, the policymakers, to invest and make policy changes that would provide a better systems around climate change, around sexual rights, around youth economic empowerment and youth participation.
Lovely answer. Thanks so much, Juliet. And I also think this is a good opportunity to plug our third webinar on the 1st of December, where our CEO Perry will be answering exactly this question about the future of restless development and what that will look like. I think that about takes us up to our time. So I'd just like to finish up by saying an enormous thank you to our fantastic speakers, Jim and Juliet, and to you, everyone who's joined us. It's been really great to connect with you all virtually and hear your wonderful questions. We hope to see you at the next webinar next week at the same time to hear from young leader Mans Kanu about our entrepreneurship work in Sierra Leone. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining us.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, everyone, for listening.